Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. And during the month of October, I talk about especially spooky literature. And that is the case for today, as it is Poetry Thursday, and so I want to talk about some poetry that has caught my attention recently. And today's poem is all about a spooky creature from Native American folklore. I am referring to Windigo by Louise Erdrich. For those who don't know, Louise Erdrich is an American author. She is from the Chippewa Nation, and she's been writing since the 1970s in the form of poetry, children's stories, novels, short fiction, quite a bit of things. And what's interesting is that, this isn't the first time I've even come across Louise. I think I've come across her, for the first time this month alone. But I came across her in multiple ways because I'm also reading a book, The Sentence, which is by her. And I kind of stumbled upon this poem by accident. I didn't intend to read her poetry this month, but it really caught my eye. And in my job, I often remediate PDFs, make them more accessible for students with disabilities for a variety of reasons for their classes. And one student is taking a Native American Studies class, and they ended up coming across some work from Louise Erdrich. So it's just funny how this person has been popping up in my life quite frequently by accident even. And she's a really fascinating author, focusing on the Native American experience, her own personal experiences, and really focusing on books in general, which is something that The Sentence kind of covers, and is partially related to her life, as she frequently she owns a bookstore, Birchmark Books, I think it's called, or something like that, and which is pretty cool. So in addition to writing, she also sells the book. So probably stocking mostly her own books. At least that's what I would do in a similar situation. But yeah, seems to be a pretty interesting author with quite a history behind her. And so without further ado, let's talk about the poem at hand, The Windigo. I will read it, do a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So The Windigo begins with a short introduction that says, "The Windigo is a flesh-eating, wintry demon with a man buried deep inside of it. In some Chippewa stories, a young girl vanquishes this monster by forcing boiling lard down its throat, thereby releasing the human at the core of ice." Windigo. "You knew I was coming for you, little one, when the kettle jumped into the fire. Towels flapped on the hooks, and the dog crept off, groaning, to the deepest part of the woods. In the hackles of dry brush, a thin laughter started up. Mother scolded the food warm and smooth in the pot and called you to eat. But I spoke in the cold trees. New one, I have come for you. Child, hide and lie still." The sumac pushed sour red cones through the air. Copper burned in the raw wood. You saw me drag toward you. "Oh, touch me," I murmured, "and lick the soles of your feet." You dug your hands into my pale, melting fur. I stole you off, a huge thing in my bristling armor. Steam rolled from my wintry arms. Each leaf shivered from the bushes we passed until they stood, naked, spread like the clean spines of fish. Then your warm hands hummed over and shoveled themselves full of the ice and snow. I would darken and spill all night running until at last morning broke the cold earth and I carried you home, a river shaking in the sun. And so that was Windigo by Louise Erdrich. A pretty interesting poem in terms of, summary plot. Louise is talking about a young girl who has been kidnapped or stolen by a Windigo. The Windigo was watching her and decided to grab her, presumably to go off and eat her or do whatever it is that Windigos do. But the girl had some boiling lard, as she described in the introduction, poured it on the Windigo, and then the Windigo melted and turned back into a human. And then the next day, he carried the Windigo carried the young girl home, or the human inside the Windigo carried the girl home, and so the story is a bit happy there. It is interesting to see the horror element of this story, where this Windigo is so scary that the dog creeps off groaning into the darkest part of the woods, and the mother calls the daughter, but the daughter probably can't hear or didn't make it home in time. And there's a mysterious voice in the trees from the Windigo that says, "New one, I have come for you, child. Hide and lie still." Kind of like a little folk tale. You see what is it? Little Red Riding Hood. Where the Little Red Riding Hood meets the wolf in the woods, and she hears all these strange and scary things and deals with the fact that a wolf ate her grandmother. Very interesting, but kind of similar into those kind of stories, getting at the kind of stories that we share about the things that are deep in the woods. Because we often tell children, don't go into the woods. You might encounter something scary, and in this case, we tell children the story of the Windigo, or the Chippewa, and various other Native American tribes told their children about Wendigos and other such creatures, as a means of passing down stories, but also as a means of, warning children about what they might encounter in the woods. Now, it is interesting that the Windigo is described as animal-like, but it's also described in a very compassionate human tone. It says, "I sold you off, a huge thing in my bristling armor," which is a very unusual way to describe a scary creature, bristling armor. "Steam rolled from my wintry arms, each leaf shivered from the bushes we passed." And then he goes on to say, your warm hands, dug into the snow to deal with the fact that she probably touched hot water or hot lard or something like that. But at the end it says, "And I carried you home, a river shaking in the sun." Very beautiful description. But, someone carrying a young girl home, it's very noble, very, very father-like, which I think Louise Erdrich is kind of getting at here, is a very fatherly kind of parent-like tone, that deep beneath the monster was someone worth caring about, that the Windigo was once a human being, and that's perhaps what matters there. They might have done something terrible, like cannibalism, I think is the myth that leads you to become a Windigo, but at the heart of it, there's still a human there who felt and continues to feel things. So a lot of interesting ideas in this poem. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Windigo by Louise Erdrich. Pretty fun poem and a spooky poem worth talking about during the spooky months and even outside of October as well. If you read this poem before, you simply want to comment on something I said here, do so below. Let's have a discussion about this poem, and I'll put a link to it in the description so that you can find it and read it if you want to. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this poem or this author or Poetry Thursday if they want to talk about poetry for themselves. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and woodland travels. Don't get lost in the forest. Farewell.